You know that moment when someone criticizes you and you feel that tightness in your chest? That small voice that whispers you should defend yourself, explain yourself, prove them wrong. That reflex is not protecting you. It is exposing you. It is showing everyone exactly where your weakness lives. And the truth is, most people spend their entire lives as prisoners to that reflex. They build their identity around what others think. They move through the world like open wounds, reacting to every touch, every word, every glance. They call it being sensitive. They call it being empathetic, but Nietzsche would call it what it really is: psychological slavery. This video is not about building thicker skin. Thicker skin still feels the blow. It just hides the bruise better. This is about something far more essential, far more needed in a world that constantly demands you shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. This is about becoming psychologically untouchable, not numb, not cold, not disconnected, but sovereign, unbreakable in a way that terrifies people who are still chained to the approval of crowds. And if you have ever felt exhausted from caring too much about what others think, if you have ever shaped your words to avoid judgment, if you have ever abandoned your truth because someone else could not handle it, then what you are about to discover will either liberate you or disturb you deeply. Maybe, but let me tell you something Nietzsche understood that most people never will. The opinions of others are not reflections of your value. They are projections of their own fears, insecurities, and limitations. When someone judges you, they are not seeing you. They are seeing a distorted version of you filtered through their own pain, their own unmet needs, their own unexamined beliefs. And yet you give that distortion power. You let it shape your decisions. You let it silence your voice. You let it convince you that you need to be smaller, quieter, more acceptable. Why? Because somewhere along the way you were taught that belonging matters more than sovereignty, that being liked matters more than being true. But here's what no one tells you. The people whose opinions you fear the most are often the people who understand you the least. They've never walked your path. They have never carried your burden. They have never faced your darkness or earned your light, and yet you give them authority over your inner world. You give them the power to determine whether you feel worthy, capable, enough. That is not connection. That is self-betrayal. And the cost of that betrayal is not just your peace. It is your power. It is your clarity. It is your ability to move through the world as yourself, fully expressed, fully alive, fully unapologetic. Nietzsche wrote about the concept of the herd mentality, the way most people surrender their individuality to feel safe within the group. They adopt the group's values, the group's fears, the group's limitations. They stop asking what is true for them and start asking what is acceptable to others. And in that surrender, they lose something essential. They lose their psychological independence. They become reactive instead of sovereign, defensive instead of grounded, fragile instead of unbreakable. And the tragedy is not that they lose themselves. The tragedy is that they do not even realize it is happening. They think they are being reasonable. They think they are being kind. They think they are being connected, but they are just being controlled. Now, before you dismiss this as cold or arrogant, understand something critical. Becoming untouchable by others' opinions does not mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop letting their unexamined projections define your reality. It means you develop the psychological strength to hold your truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable. It means you stop performing for approval and start living from clarity. And that kind of inner freedom is not selfish. It is necessary, because the world does not need more people who shrink themselves to make others feel safe. The world needs people who are strong enough to stand in their truth, even when it disrupts the comfort of the crowd. So how do you build this kind of mind? How do you become psychologically untouchable? It starts with understanding something most people never examine. You are not afraid of their opinions. You are afraid of what those opinions mean about you. You are afraid that if they see you as wrong, foolish, arrogant, or flawed, then maybe you are those things. You are afraid that their perception reveals some hidden truth you have been trying to avoid, and that fear keeps you hostage. It keeps you editing yourself, explaining yourself, justifying yourself. It keeps you trapped in an endless loop of seeking validation from people who may never give it. But what if their opinion does not mean anything about you? What if it only means something about them? What if their criticism is just a reflection of their own unmet expectations, their own unresolved pain, their own need to control what they do not understand? What if you could see their judgment not as a mirror of your worth, but as a window into their limitations? That shift in perspective is not denial. It is clarity. It is the recognition that most people are not evaluating you. They are evaluating their version of you, and their version is almost always incomplete, distorted, and shaped by factors that have nothing to do with who you actually are. Nietzsche spoke about the will to power, the drive to overcome obstacles, and assert one's own values in the face of resistance. But this is not about dominating others. It is about refusing to be dominated by their fears. It is about reclaiming your psychological sovereignty from the tyranny of external validation. And that process is not comfortable. It requires you to confront the parts of yourself that still cling to approval. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. It requires you to accept that some people will never see you clearly, and that is not your problem to solve. Here is where most people fail. They think becoming untouchable means they will stop feeling the sting of criticism. They think they will reach some state of enlightened indifference, where nothing bothers them, but that is not how it works. You will still feel it. The difference is, you will no longer let it control you. You will feel the discomfort, acknowledge it, and then choose your response based on your values, not their expectations. You will stop reacting from fear and start responding from strength. And that shift, that small but profound shift, changes everything. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you share an idea that matters to you, something you have thought deeply about, something that reflects your truth, and someone dismisses it. They tell you it is naive, impractical, or wrong. In that moment, you have two choices. You can defend yourself, explain yourself, try to convince them that your idea has value, or you can recognize that their dismissal says more about their capacity to understand than it does about the quality of your idea. You can let them be wrong about you without needing to correct them. You can hold your truth without needing their agreement. That is psychological freedom. That is what it means to be untouchable. But most people cannot do this. Most people need everyone to understand them, agree with them, validate to them, and that need makes them weak. It makes them sacrifice their clarity for the illusion of acceptance. And the irony is, the more you need their approval, the less they respect you. People can sense desperation. They can sense when you are bending yourself to fit their expectations. And it does not make them like you more. It makes them trust you less. Because deep down, everyone knows that someone who abandons their truth to gain approval is someone who cannot be trusted to stand for anything. Nietzsche understood this. He understood that the strongest minds are the ones that do not need permission to exist. They do not need validation to speak. They do not need agreement to move forward. They operate from an internal standard, a personal code that is not negotiable. And that kind of psychological independence is rare. It is unsettling. It threatens people who are still enslaved to the opinions of others because it exposes their weakness. It shows them what they could be if they were brave enough to stop performing for the crowd. Now, here is the part that makes people uncomfortable. Becoming psychologically untouchable means accepting that you will lose people. Not everyone, but some. The ones who need you to stay small. The ones who need you to stay uncertain. The ones who benefit from your need for their approval. When you stop seeking their validation, when you stop shrinking yourself to make them comfortable, they will not celebrate your growth. They will resist it. They will criticize it. They will try to pull you back into the dynamic where they had power over you. And you have to be strong enough to let them go. This is where most people turn back. They taste freedom and then retreat because the cost feels too high. They would rather live in the prison of other people's opinions than face the loneliness of sovereignty. But that loneliness is temporary. What is permanent is the peace that comes from no longer betraying yourself for acceptance. What is permanent is the clarity that comes from living according to your own truth. What is permanent is the strength that comes from building a mind so unbreakable that other people's projections cannot touch it. If you are still watching, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel. Not because I need the validation, but because you need the reminder. You need the consistent voice that tells you it is okay to be strong. It is okay to be selective. It is okay to refuse to shrink yourself for others. The algorithm will bury this content if you do not engage with it. So, like this video, Comment below with one area of your life where you are still giving too much power to others' opinions. Let this be the moment you start reclaiming that power, because what you are about to learn in the second part of this video will show you exactly how to build that unbreakable mind. And trust me, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So you have recognized the pattern. You have seen how much of your psychological energy is wasted managing other people's perceptions of you. You have felt the exhaustion of constantly editing yourself, justifying yourself, defending yourself. And now you are ready for the next level. You are ready to understand not just why you need to become untouchable, but how to actually build that kind of mind. Because awareness without action is just sophisticated suffering. You see the cage, but you stay inside it. And that is worse than not seeing it at all. Let me tell you what Nietzsche discovered about psychological strength. It is not built through positive affirmations. It is not built through convincing yourself you do not care. It is built through a process he called self-overcoming. It is the deliberate practice of choosing your truth over their comfort, again and again, until it becomes your default. Until the need for their approval loses its grip on you. Until you are so grounded in your own values that their opinions become background noise. And that process is not easy. It is not fast. But it is absolutely necessary if you want to live as a sovereign being instead of a reactive one. The first step in building an unbreakable mind is developing what I call psychological discernment. This is the ability to distinguish between feedback that serves your growth and criticism that serves their comfort. Not all opinions are equal. Some come from people who understand you, who have walked a similar path, who want to see you evolve. Those opinions are worth considering, but most criticism does not come from that place. Most criticism comes from fear, projection, and the desperate need to pull you back into the familiar. And if you cannot tell the difference, you will waste years of your life trying to satisfy people who will never be satisfied because their problem is not with you. Their problem is with themselves. Here's how you develop that discernment. When someone criticizes you, pause. Do not react. Do not defend. Just pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First, does this person actually understand what I am trying to do? Second, is this criticism based on my actions or their assumptions? Third, does this person have the life I want or the wisdom I respect? If the answer to any of these questions is no, their opinion is irrelevant. Not wrong, not bad, just irrelevant to your path. And you can let it go without needing to correct them, convince them, or defend yourself to them. But most people cannot do this. Most people treat every opinion as equally valid. They give the same weight to criticism from someone who understands them as they do to criticism from someone who barely knows them. And that lack of discernment destroys their clarity. It keeps them trapped in an endless cycle of seeking approval from people who have no authority to give it. So the first practice is this. Get ruthlessly selective about whose opinions you let into your inner world. Not everyone deserves access to your peace. Not everyone has earned the right to shape your decisions. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you become psychologically untouchable. The second step is learning to reframe discomfort. Most people avoid being misunderstood because it feels bad. It feels like rejection. It feels like failure. But what if that discomfort is actually a sign of growth? What if being misunderstood means you are operating at a level most people cannot comprehend yet? What if their confusion is not a reflection of your clarity, but a reflection of their limitations? Nietzsche wrote that the higher you climb, the smaller you appear to those still on the ground. And that is not a tragedy. That is just perspective. Think about the people you admire most. The ones who changed the world, who disrupted industries, who spoke truths that made others uncomfortable. Were they universally liked? Were they universally understood? No. They were criticized, dismissed, rejected by the very people who would later claim to have always believed in them. And they moved forward anyway. Not because they did not feel the sting of judgment, but because they valued their mission more than they valued being understood. That is the mindset you need to cultivate. The willingness to be misunderstood in service of something greater than approval. Here is a practice that will change everything. The next time someone misunderstands you, do not correct them. Do not explain yourself. Just let them be wrong. Sit with the discomfort of knowing they have an inaccurate perception of you and choose not to fix it. This is not about being arrogant. It is about recognizing that their perception is their responsibility, not yours. You are not obligated to manage how others see you. You are only obligated to live in alignment with your truth. And the more you practice letting others be wrong about you, the more psychological freedom you will experience. The third step is building what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate. This is the practice of accepting everything that happens, including criticism, rejection, and misunderstanding, as necessary for your evolution. Instead of resisting it, you embrace it. Instead of seeing it as a problem, you see it as information. When someone criticizes you, you do not collapse into self-doubt. You ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Is there a kernel of truth here that I need to integrate? Or is this just their discomfort with my growth? And either way, you move forward stronger. This is where most people get stuck. They think amor fati means being passive, accepting everything without discernment. But that is not it at all. It means you stop wasting energy resisting what is. You stop wishing people understood you. You stop hoping they will change. You accept reality exactly as it is. And then you choose your response from a place of strength, not reaction. That is the difference between someone who is psychologically untouchable and someone who is just pretending to be. The untouchable person does not need reality to be different. They work with reality as it is. Let me give you another example. Imagine you set a boundary with someone and they react badly. They tell you that you are being selfish, cold, or unreasonable. Most people, in that moment, will doubt themselves. They will question whether their boundary was valid. They will soften it or apologize for it. But someone with an unbreakable mind does not do that. They recognize that the other person's discomfort with a boundary is not evidence that the boundary is wrong. It is evidence that the boundary is necessary. Because people who respect your limits do not need to be reminded of them. And people who violate your limits will always make you feel guilty for having them. This brings me to the fourth step. Developing emotional immunity. This does not mean you stop feeling emotions. It means you stop letting other people's emotions control yours. Most people are emotional sponges. Someone is angry at them and they absorb that anger. Someone is disappointed in them and they carry that disappointment. Someone is uncomfortable with their growth and they shrink to ease that discomfort. But that is not empathy. That is codependency, and it will destroy your psychological sovereignty. Nietzsche understood that the strongest minds are the ones that can hold space for others, emotions without taking responsibility for them. You can acknowledge that someone is upset without making their upset your problem to solve. You can recognize that someone disagrees with you without needing to change their mind. You can see that someone is uncomfortable with your choices without needing to justify those choices. That is emotional immunity. That is what it means to be psychologically free. Here is how you build it. The next time someone reacts emotionally to something you said or did, practice this phrase. I hear you, and I am not changing my position. You do not need to argue. You do not need to defend. You just acknowledge their feeling and hold your ground. And the first few times you do this, it will feel brutal. It will feel harsh. It will feel like you are being cold. But you are not being cold. You are being clear. And clarity is the most loving thing you can offer someone, even if they are not ready to receive it. Now, let me address something that might be bothering you. You might be thinking, if I become untouchable, will I lose my humanity? Will I become isolated, disconnected, incapable of real intimacy? And the answer is no. In fact, the opposite happens. When you are no longer desperate for approval, you become capable of genuine connection. Because you are not performing. You are not hiding. You are not editing yourself to be acceptable. You are showing up as you actually are. And the people who resonate with that version of you are the only people worth having in your life anyway. The fifth step is practicing selective vulnerability. This is where most people misunderstand psychological strength. They think being untouchable means never opening up, never sharing, never letting anyone see their struggles. But that is not strength. That is fear disguised as strength. Real strength is knowing exactly who deserves access to your inner world and protecting that access fiercely. It is being vulnerable with the few and impenetrable to the many. It is understanding that not everyone has earned the right to your truth. Nietzsche wrote about the concept of the noble soul, someone who gives generously but does not cast pearls before swine. This is not about arrogance. It is about discernment. It is recognizing that your energy, your truth, your vulnerability are valuable, and you do not give valuable things to people who will not appreciate them. You do not share your deepest thoughts with people who will use them against you. You do not expose your struggles to people who will see them as weakness. You save those gifts for the ones who have proven themselves worthy. And here's what happens when you do this. The people who are not aligned with you fall away. The ones who needed you to stay small, who benefited from your uncertainty, who fed on your need for approval, they disappear. And it hurts. It feels like loss. But it is not loss. It is liberation. Because the space they occupied was preventing the right people from entering. And once you make peace with that, once you stop clinging to connections that drain you, you create room for relationships that actually nourish you. The sixth step, and this is critical, is building a personal philosophy that is Most people do not have this. They have preferences. They have opinions. They have beliefs that shift depending on who they are talking to. But they do not have a core philosophy, a set of principles that guides their decisions regardless of external pressure. And without that foundation, they are endlessly manipulable. They change their stance based on who is watching. They abandon their truth to avoid conflict. They betray themselves repeatedly and wondered why they feel so empty. Nietzsche called this creating your own values. It is the process of examining everything you have been taught, everything you have absorbed from culture, family, and society, and deciding consciously what you actually believe. Not what you are supposed to believe. Not what makes you acceptable, but what is true for you. And once you have that clarity, once you have built that internal structure, other people's opinions lose their power because you are no longer uncertain. You are no longer looking for external validation of your truth. You have validated it yourself. Here is a practice. Write down your non-negotiable values, the principles you will not compromise on regardless of who disagrees. Maybe it is honesty. Maybe it is freedom. Maybe it is growth. Whatever they are, write them down. And then, every time you face a decision, ask yourself, does this align with my values? If yes, move forward. If no, do not do it. No matter how much pressure you feel, no matter how many people tell you that you are wrong, this is how you build an unbreakable mind. This is how you become psychologically sovereign. The seventh and final step is embracing radical responsibility. This is the understanding that no one is coming to save you. No one is going to give you permission to be yourself. No one is going to validate your truth for you. You have to do it. You have to become the authority in your own life. You have to stop waiting for others to understand you and start living in a way that makes their understanding irrelevant. And that is terrifying, because it means you are alone with your choices. But it is also liberating, because it means you are finally free. Nietzsche wrote that man is something to be overcome, and what he meant is that you are not finished. You are not complete. You are a work in progress, constantly evolving, constantly shedding the parts of yourself that no longer serve you. And one of the parts you need to shed is the version of you that needs everyone's approval. That version is weak. That version is controllable. That version will never know peace. So you have to kill it. Not violently, not dramatically, but deliberately. You have to choose, again and again, to be yourself, even when it costs you comfort. Even when it costs you connection. Even when it costs you the illusion of safety. And here is what happens when you do this consistently. You become someone people cannot figure out. You become someone who does not fit into their categories. You become someone who makes them uncomfortable simply by existing in your truth. And they will not like it. They will criticize you. They will call you arrogant, selfish, cold. They will try to pull you back into the familiar. But you will not go. Because you have tasted freedom. And once you taste it, you cannot go back to the cage. So let me ask you something. Are you ready to build a mind so strong that other people's opinions cannot touch it? Are you ready to stop performing for approval and start living from clarity? Are you ready to become psychologically untouchable? Because if you are, everything changes. Your relationships become more authentic. Your decisions become more aligned. Your energy stops leaking into the void of seeking validation from people who will never give it. And you finally experience what Nietzsche called the will to power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. Sovereignty, freedom, The kind of inner strength that terrifies people who are still enslaved. If this resonated with you, do not just watch and forget. Leave a comment below telling me one thing you are going to stop seeking approval for. One area where you are going to start living from your truth instead of their expectations. And subscribe to this channel because I am going to keep creating content that challenges you, that disturbs you, that pushes you toward the person you know you are capable of becoming. The algorithm does not reward truth, it rewards comfort. So if you want more of this, you have to actively choose it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and prepare yourself for the next one. Because we are just getting started, and what you discover next will take everything you learned here and weaponize it. I will see you there.